Then we got into this bizarre conversation about human consciousness and where did it start. And I was just like, dude, you're a potato. You're a potato logistics guy. Like,
Who's that?
we're discussing what? Human
consciousness.
consciousness? And he was telling me something that I hadn't ever heard was that through like DNA now, because so through the conversation of human consciousness, that now because of genetic stuff,
Okay.
they're looking at trying to breed Neanderthals, combine DNA, and have surrogate mothers give birth to Neanderthals, so that they can study the Neanderthal. My point was, I think I saw this movie, and it doesn't turn out well.
Yeah, I mean, well, once you do the breeding, you can't get rid of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be another bizarre conversation. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, what are we gonna do with them now? Like,
There's some laws around.
exactly. Well, he said that they're even talking about almost Jurassic Park-ish,
Oh man,
like raising saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths so that they can be in a zoo. I was like, yeah, it's Jurassic Park. I saw that movie too.
And again,
It's like AI, right? I saw that movie too.
yeah.
Like,
When it goes bad, it goes real bad.
and there's no off button. So I just think it's crazy. But let's get started with like what was the first time you were like the direction? What was the first turning point, I guess, in your life? You're like, hey, this is what I want to do. Oh, Alexa. It's a good song though. Alexa, off. So what was that?
I think the first turning point for me, I was in corporate America. So I was working for Cigna with the health insurance plan.
Okay.
Fortune 500 company.
Mm-hmm.
I was there for close to 2 years.
Okay. So how did you get there though? Was that something in school? Like,
Yeah. I mean, after grad school, I did what every person who graduates with the MBA does. They go into consulting.
right.
But then you realize as a consultant, you really don't know anything. You got hired to do the grunt work. You don't really.
Exactly.
It's really hard to give someone advice on a business when you've never been in business yourself.
A lot of people do it though.
Yeah, apparently it's a very attractive field. So I was a consultant for a large healthcare strategy firm.
Right. So why business though? Was that something from when you were a kid? You were like, hey,
Yeah.
I find business intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, from high school, I was, to make extra money, I was selling burned CDs. I always had some type of hustle going on. I mean,
And that's something I don't think kids nowadays even know.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you said that, they'd be like, a what?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was in, every phase of my life, I always had some type of side business.
Okay. So yeah, entrepreneurial spirit.
Has always been there for me. Like,
So is that something you saw from your parents or just?
Yeah, I mean, both my parents were in business for themselves.
Right.
Grew up around it, and I saw the good and bad of it, right? I mean, I saw the positives of being your own boss, having your own freedom, kind of doing what you want to do, but then the bad parts of it of being your own boss, having to take care of employees,
payrolls due.
payroll, vacation is not really vacation because it really is just lost productivity.
Right.
And you got to make up for it when you come back. So you see all those pieces on both sides of the coin. You're like, okay, well, is this something I want to pursue? And initially, you finish school. I get my MBA. I'm all I've always liked healthcare. My parents were in healthcare, but I don't know if I want the lifestyle of the entrepreneur. Right. So I went the corporate route and worked for a large consulting firm, worked for Cigna, Fortune 500 company, and when I was there, I realized just kind of going through the motions after 3 or 4 years in that sector area, I was like, I'm not a good employee.
That was my realization too. I am a terrible employee.
Yeah. You sit back and you're like, man, I'm not trying as hard as I should be.
Right.
I'm not motivated by the goals that they're providing.
Right.
I'm not interested in making this company better.
Oh yeah.
And
just doing my job, clocking in, clocking
yeah,
out.
I'm getting a check.
Yeah, I get paid no matter what I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this what I want for the rest of my life?
Right.
And I was just like, no, I don't think so.
Some combination, maybe.
Yeah. And that's kind of when I was like, okay, well, I need to make a pivot.
Okay.
At that point in time, I was living in Phoenix. My mom and my uncle had invested into a hospital in Bakersfield.
Mm-hmm.
My cousin was already working there,
Right.
and they were asking me like, "Hey, come! Like, we need help with
Right.
the operations. We need assistance in managing this thing on a day-to-day basis."
Okay. So you actually came in as the infrastructure piece
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of given my background,
Right.
they asked me to come in. I was like, cool. Like, this is not full entrepreneurship,
Right.
but this is
Huh.
part entrepreneurship.
Right. Gonna dip your toe in the water and
Yeah.
see. Okay.
And so I made the pivot. I quit. I moved.
Right. Yeah, the weather's not much different.
Yeah, my weather's not much different. So hey, I moved in July.
Oh, nice. Well, you got a decrease in temperature then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sit right there.
Yeah, I think so.
That's your comfortable position. Yeah. Okay, cool. I got you. All right. Let me get that down.
That's why we have the high-tech people around.
Yeah, like, I don't know any of
understand
this.
this. Yeah, I don't know.
I got you.
I'll probably break it before I.
That's what I told Mo. He was like, I don't want to learn how to do it.
I got you. Here we go. All right, you're good to go.
All right.
There you go.
Yeah, so made the move, came out here, and got into the operations. And,
Okay.
I think it was 4 or 5 months after that I got here, my uncle had a massive heart attack.
Oh, jeez.
And
That's a big pivot.
yeah, it was a big pivot. And all of a sudden, my cousin and I were kind of in the background, kind of got thrust to the front.
Right.
He was the primary decision maker, and he was no longer able to make decisions. And so me and him were like, well, I guess we got to figure this out.
And about how many employees was it then?
At that point, it was about 300 employees.
Okay. So it's not like stepping into a mom and pop.
No. It was 300 employees, 2 different facilities, one on Airport and Olive, one on White Lane and Grissom.
Okay. So that must have been a huge learning time.
Yeah. I mean, that was trial by fire. That was it was you went from having kind of this backbone where you can bounce stuff off and ideas,
Right.
to all of a sudden losing that. You have, to be frank, a bunch of sharks in the water
Oh, yeah.
because people are now seeing vulnerability.
Yeah, blood's in the water. The sharks are coming.
And they're seeing ways to take advantage of the business. So you have to protect from that.
Right.
And at the same time, you got to kind of right the ship and keep it operational and figure out a strategy and path forward that you didn't initially plan.
Yeah.
And so, I think for those first 2 years after that, we were working 7 days a week. I'd get.
So you were thrown from, hey, I'm part entrepreneur into, no, it's
It's
all day, every day.
all day, every day.
No off button.
No. Payrolls due. They call you like, where's it at? What are we doing?
What's the bank account balance?
Exactly. The bank's calling for financials. Produce them.
Right.
You got to meet with the bank. You got to meet with regulators. You got to meet with
Right.
licensing, accreditation, all everything that goes. Healthcare is highly regulated, so we got 101 people to answer to.
Right. Plus, you got all the insurance stuff, right? All
Yeah.
the insurance contracts and
Yeah, contract renegotiations,
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
Thrown into it.
So you get thrown into it. I mean, granted, I was on the consulting side for a little bit, but I mean, I wasn't in the weeds.
Right. Yeah, I think so. How did you come out of that then? So you're running that, you get it solidified,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, basically 2 years and no days off.
Right.
We get it solidified. We restructure. At the same time as we do all that, we learn the market. I mean,
Okay,
we really
yeah.
learn what's going to make it in the market, what's not.
Right.
And then we decide for the psych hospital, valuations are on the rise. Things look really good there.
Right.
Let's take the psych hospital to market.
Okay.
Let's sell it.
Right. So part of that, though, is because of the sharks in the water, right? But solidifying it, then the value in your multiplier
Goes up.
goes up exponentially, right?
Yeah, and so I mean, when we're learning the market, we're learning what's attractive, what's not,
Right.
and part of what we see is this high interest in behavioral health inpatient facilities.
Yeah, but this is before the tsunami that came
Yeah,
with COVID, right?
correct. This is before. We sold in 2015.
Okay.
The psych hospital. And but really in 2014 is kind of when we realized, oh yeah, this could be very attractive.
Huh.
And so all of a sudden you start learning about how to sell a business.
Right.
And you start learning, okay, I need to trim my expenses as much as possible.
Right.
I need to make my earnings look as healthy as possible.
Right. Yeah, because you got to maximize that EBITDA, right?
Exactly. You
And I
gotta
think that's
maximize
what-
the multiple.
Yeah, we talk about like just my learning curve in the therapy world was that you talk to these people like a mom and pop shop, and they're like, oh, well, I've been doing this for 30 years, so I think it's worth whatever number's in their head. And then you have to come in and explain that it's not that number. It's not even close to that number, right? Because
Yeah.
you're limited. You have no geographical span. You have no,
No.
your value is, oh, I'm making some money off of this. But if I come in and buy it, I have to replace you.
And no one's going to work as hard as you.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
my productivity is going to go down.
Right.
And I'm also, I don't have any economies of scale. Like you as the owner are managing the human resources, the payroll,
Right.
the, all the day-to-day back ends.
Right.
I replace you with an employee to do your function. They're not going to do all of that for me.
Right.
So I just increased my costs. I lost productivity.
Right. So there's values.
Values diminished.
Right. So,
And-
but knowing that, you intentionally said, okay, and I think it's another mistake that I see owners make, right? They don't prepare. They just
Yeah.
decide one day, like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to sell this. They haven't done all those things to increase their EBITDA, to increase their multipliers.
Without a doubt. I mean, it took us a year before we said, from the day we said, yeah, we need to take this thing and sell it, to actually going on the market and selling it, it was a year.
Right.
And that whole year, all we did was try to make ourselves look as attractive as possible.
Right. And I think that's part of what gets founders in trouble too, is without an exit plan. If you're not actively working on an exit plan, you're at the mercy of the market, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and that process helped me learn for kind of our second
Right.
iteration
Yeah.
of business, that you walk into a business with the idea of an exit plan.
Right.
If your idea, and I feel like there's two modes in business, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one like the mom and pop shop, and you basically bought yourself a job.
Right. You just call it something different.
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, that
Yeah.
means you work a lot.
Exactly. You didn't scale your business. You kept it solo, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Oh, no.
Like
Yeah.
certain people, that's what they want to do. They want to keep everything kind of in their locus of control, and they want to be independent, but they also want to have their own business. And they're kind of like that single operator that does everything, works a lot,
Right.
makes good money,
Yeah.
but it is not looking to scale their business, which diminishes their exit strategy value, right?
Yeah.
Then there's other flip to it where it's like, oh, I'm coming in, I'm going to expand,
Right.
I'm going to kind of create a geography for myself.
Right.
And
Knowing that down the road will pay off with
Exactly.
a higher multipliers, higher EBITDA. I think I had an interesting conversation with one of my therapists a couple years ago, and they were like, because all three of my kids graduated college, none of them are physical therapists. So one of my therapists was like, "What's the plan?" Like, because what you see a lot, especially in Bakersfield, is that family lineage, right? Like somebody started it, the kids come in, take over, which can be a fantastic way to go. But it also creates that for the employees, like the insecurity of, oh, where's this thing going?
Mm-hmm.
None of your kids are coming. And I just, so, well, that was hiring Ken
yeah,
8 years ago, right? Like, that was part of that. I knew 8 years ago that none of my kids were going to go into this. So I need to find, like what you did at the hospital, I need to find the person that understands business to come in. So there is somewhere to go with it.
yeah,
And they can look at the numbers and say, hey, what's the goal right now? Are we trying to maximize profits so we maximize EBITDA, or are we just running it and you're happy and let's keep growing and organically growing it?
Well, and that's a big point, right? Because I mean, your first part of the growth category, no one's really putting money into you,
Oh, yeah.
and so you got to use your own profits
Right.
to build the business,
Right.
and so doing that is taking money out of your pocket
Right.
and just leaving it in the business to fund growth,
Exactly.
and you have to be comfortable and willing to do that because a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to take as much money off the table right from the get-go.
Yeah, I see that now being 25 years into the therapy world. I'll see these new therapists come up and be like, oh, I want to have my own place. Okay, well, good luck with insurance contracts,
Yeah,
lease negotiations. But then people tell you, at least I used to hear it all the time, like, okay, here's what you want to do. Go buy a building, and I thought, I want to stay more liquid.
yeah,
But now I look back and I see these other people, and it's like they're still following that model of, oh no, my family said this is what I should do. It's like, okay, great, you just took yourself off the table of being a competitor of mine.
yeah, because you're limiting your growth, right?
Right.
Either you're choosing to have a plan and expand every year or every couple of years, add a unit, increase your geography, increase your market penetration, or you're gonna you own the building.
Have one big facility. I'm going to own the building. Oh, I'm going to have rent payments for years in the future.
But that's it.
Right.
Then your business value becomes when you sell the building.
Right. That's the only value, right?
Yeah.
Because the actual business has very little value.
Yeah.
So, which is a good pivot into what you've created since, right? Like, so what was that pivot like when you're like, all right, we sold the psych hospital.
Yeah, we saw this huge demand in outpatient behavioral health, and the fact that people aren't doing it well. There's not a cohesive string of like chain of clinics that do this, and so we said, okay, let's get into this. Let's do this. Outpatient care is easier than inpatient care. It's less costly.
Yeah.
But insurance companies are trying to push, doesn't matter what sector of healthcare, they're trying to push everyone outpatient.
Right.
So they want more outpatient care. If you do it well, brand it well, have nice locations, you can attract clients, and you can have a great service.
So what was your first jump? Did you do one facility?
Yeah, we
Okay.
did one facility in at the end of 2014
Okay.
when we were going to market to sell the psych hospital.
Okay. So you were already in that planning phase.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, 'cause I think it's another big mistake that I hear people make is, well, I'm going to sell my company. Well, what are you going to do after that? I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'm like, that's a bad strategy. Like,
Yeah, we were already planning to open, and so we were opening as our sale was happening,
okay, cool.
and so we did that. We opened one, and had like amazing traction on it. About a year later, we moved into a location
Right.
that was double the size.
Okay.
Picked up some additional employees, launched an offshoot program, basically across the street from our new location, and ended up having 2 locations in Bakersfield within the first 3 years.
Nice. Yeah, ours was. Mine. It's weird because my story is very similar, right? I started in '98, opened my first one. I think in the beginning of 2000, I was like, got all the advice that just have one big one, listen to all my advisors, and then did the exact opposite, open a second one. And my fear at the time was, hey, if I make too much noise, the bigger guys can come like cut me off, right? They can go to the insurance panels, they can go, or they can open up a facility right next
Yeah.
to mine. And it was that little bit of a phobia that I was like, but if I have 2, it's going to make them harder to
Yeah.
try to compete against 2. And then open the third one. We had 3 in 3 years.
Yeah.
And it just, but then you start to realize, but you had already had the background of infrastructure, so you knew how to build it, right? I was just like flying blind. I was like,
Yeah, I mean, we learned it through the hospital and refined it doing this. Right. And that's kind of when we're like, okay, now we got 2 under our belt. We know the model. We know how this works. Let's start taking more of our profit and just funneling it in. And so, we opened up in San Luis Obispo, then we went to Fresno. And then we started buying out a couple mom and pop places that were not performing well, especially, as costs started increasing, insurances started reimbursing less. They didn't have the margins anymore.
Right.
We had the infrastructure. It wasn't going to cost us anymore to operate.
so how'd you make the decision to go there, to go to, which one was first? Slow?
Slow.
Okay.
Slow, a lot of it was we just looked at what services were available.
So underserved market.
Yeah, underserved markets. Look at underserved markets, certain population size, income demographics.
Right. Okay.
And-
so you use some statistics too. 'Cause,
Yeah.
we talked to Ken last time about how we use statistics. So I think there's a misconception as people see you grow that you're just throwing darts at a dartboard, right? Like, that's a good idea. Like, let's go here.
I mean, granted, some of it
Some of that's true.
is
Yeah.
throwing a dart at a dartboard. I mean, without a doubt. But
True.
on the other side to it, I was talking to a friend of mine who's thinking about kind of branching out and doing their own business, and one of the things I said was, you got to be willing to expand. You got to be willing to fail.
Right.
You can't scale a business if you're not willing to fail, and you're going to have failures.
Right.
But you got to try to calculate some risk in there, right?
Right. Yeah.
So some of it is throwing a dart at the dartboard. Some of it is at least having some baseline numbers
Right.
to say, yeah, if you look at it high level, I think this works. I think this supports the business that we're doing. And now I'm going to throw the dart at the dartboard, choose a location, put my flag in the ground,
Right.
and I'm going to open
Let's
up.
go ahead and go. Right.
Yeah.
So what was one of the ones where, because I've had several where we said, hey, we think this is a good location, and it turned out to be a dog, right? It turned out to be.
I mean, our most recent acquisition was in Victorville, and there's no competition there. We just thought, man, we're going to corner the market. This thing's going
This
to
is easy.
blow up.
It's a slam dunk.
Oh man, it has been a slog for a year and a half. And I mean, we're still at it. I think it's turning the corner. I don't know,
Right.
but it is what it is. Like, you're in it, so you got to fight for it.
It's weird when we found when you go to a new community, a new city, you got to learn that community. Like you think, oh, okay, well, it's Central Valley, right? Like it should all be kind of the same. It's like Fresno to us.
Yeah.
Fresno to us is like an animal, a beast that you'll see businesses from Bakersfield try to go up there thinking, oh, it's just a bigger Bakersfield, but it's
It is
not. The dynamics work differently. What you can lean on in the good old boy network that you can lean on once you're a part here, you're not there, right?
Yeah, no, Fresno is actually. I was surprised of how competitive it was in Fresno, given it's larger than Bakersfield.
Right.
And I just assumed I was like, okay, there's gonna be a lot of business there. Mm-hmm. It performs fine.
Right.
I thought it was gonna perform like Bakersfield. It definitely did not.
Right. Yeah, and I know in the therapy world up there, the physical therapy world, it's still so fragmented that it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like how a city that size, but it's a bunch of small providers that somehow have this worked out relationship.
Yeah.
It's like, well, because from the business group that everybody is talking about consolidation and costs, and it's forcing consolidation. But then you see it like Fresno. It's like, why isn't it impacted? And when the shoe does, will the shoe fall?
Yeah, they're embedded, right? I mean, I think they're embedded in the community, long-standing relationships. I don't know if it falls or not, but I mean, it's the same thing on our side, right? We see, a lot of guys that have one location, maybe two. Mm-hmm. And we're wondering, how are you supporting all of this?
Right.
And, we've gained some traction, but we haven't gained the traction we expected in that market.
Yeah, we haven't either. It's been like, okay,
Yeah.
we got to rethink this thing a different way. But then other ones we've gone to, like the Hatchby, when we went up there, it was a weird opportunity. And I think that's another piece of it too, right? When you're starting to scale and you're looking at it for opportunities, how opportunities come.
Yeah.
Right? Like to Hatchby, I really didn't have an interest, but I got a call from a local hospital that had opened an outpatient clinic up there, thought they were going to be able to extend, they got a Medicare waiver, right?
Okay.
So thought they would extend the waiver, and Medicare came back and said, no, that was a one-time deal. So they had this clinic up there that they couldn't bill out of. So I get a call, and they're like, hey, you want a clinic in Tehachapi? I was like, I hadn't thought about it, but let me go see. They were just trying to get out of the market.
Yeah.
Right? So, but you have to be prepared for that. Otherwise, it's just an opportunity that leaves. And now, fast forward all these years later, and there was multiple providers up there, and now they're gone. So what was an opportunity 10 years ago, whenever it was we did it, now all of a sudden we have the market. It's like, I guess that was a good... I couldn't have predicted that.
And those happen. I mean, that's kind of how it's very similar to us in Santa Clarita. It was a program. There's a couple programs there. One was severely underfunded and underperforming. We went in thinking, okay, it's going to take us a while, but we like the market.
Right.
Let's
turn the spigot on a little bit more.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay.
And oddly enough, we had very low expectations of that, and for the first year and a half, and it kind of just completely pivoted. We beat our estimates, moved into a bigger location, launched another program, and we're like, wait, like this is completely unexpected on what happened. This was not probably in the playbook.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of it, though, too, because we talked about the ones that you think are going to be successful and aren't. The ones that you think, it's worth a shot, maybe. But I think that helps refine as you go down the path, right? Like, okay, what are we seeing when we fall in love with a project versus one that we don't really know? Like,
yeah, and I think it's don't get married to the metal, right? You you get married to these ideas of what should and should not happen, and then it throws you a curveball, and you're like, okay, I got to reevaluate my whole strategy on this.
Right.
Apparently, what I knew doesn't hold true, and that's a very important part.
Right.
What you knew and what worked 2 years ago doesn't necessarily hold true today.
Right.
And if you can't think about that and change your approach, change your strategy, you're going to be one of those groups that actually does get left behind.
Right.
And that's something we try to, in our meetings and, talking to my partners, I'm like, guys, like we always got to keep on thinking different ways, think about different ways to do things. If we start getting married to one approach,
Yeah, I think
we're going to be
you see that in a lot of businesses that, it's always worked, so it's always going to work. I'm sure Blockbuster had that conversation at some point, like, digital, it's never going to work.
Netflix,
it's a flashing thing. It's just going to disappear. Because I talked to people the other thing that I did that sounds like you did initially was I stopped paying attention to what physical therapy taught about opening clinics and started paying attention to business people.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. How come business people teach it differently of how to scale, how to look at everything? Yes, we still do physical therapy, but we want to be a solid company that does it. Mm-hmm. But then I'll talk to other people, and they're like, no, I don't think. Like venture capital, right? Venture capital came into Bakersfield, and it's like, I don't think it's going to change anything. And I'm like, okay, good. You keep thinking that, because I think it's going to change everything, and we need to pivot our thought processes, because a new kid's in town, right?
A new kid with a lot of money
Exactly.
who's going to increase wages across the board for all of us.
Right.
There's already a limited amount of employees.
Right.
You better come up with some unique strategies.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you can't outspend them.
Right. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Because they'll just go to another round of financing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then it becomes really about the culture you're building, the affinity to your business that you're building, the affinity that your customers have to your business. Right. And that's something we definitely focus on a lot, right, is getting, the client feedback surveys, getting, looking at all the various kind of data points on a monthly basis.
Right.
And the one thing we can do quicker than venture capital or like large groups, we can move quicker.
Right.
But you got to use that to your advantage. You got to be willing to pivot what you're doing on a very quick time frame.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece, right? Like spotting those trends early. Mm-hmm. Like, wait a minute. But if you're not looking at data to go, you can think, everybody's happy. Oh, well, we got plenty of referrals. We're good. And you miss that early entry or early pivot point. Like, something's coming.
Well, and I think one of the biggest missteps I see or I hear people say is, once I get to a certain size, I'm just going to check in every here and then.
Yeah, exactly.
And, someone
I'll mail it in. I'll be over at the beach.
So someone will manage it for me.
Right.
No one manages it as good as you will.
Right.
Number one. And number two, if you don't have your pulse on what is going on, no one else will. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just in our group meetings, you hear it all the time, like when the pandemic hit, which is, I think it's funny because I think it's the one word that tells you what side somebody's on.
Yeah.
If they say pandemic versus plandemic, it's an immediate, okay, I know.
Yeah.
I know where you're landing on this issue. But how do you do strategy with this world that's just, we haven't figured out. Like we talked in one meeting a couple weeks ago about what is the new normal, and I don't mean it as the political new normal of the world after COVID, but what's the new normal for business people? And how do you strategize? And it's still up in the air, right?
I think it's year by year now.
Yeah. It's no more 5-year thing.
Yeah, I think 5 years is out the door. 3 years is generous.
Right.
it's year because your year changes so quickly.
Right.
You don't know what. I mean, I think if we look at last year, right, and we talked about this a lot. Is none of us had priced in how much wages were going to increase.
Oh yeah.
And we were just, everyone was just like, oh God, like we just
Right.
keep on ratcheting up, retain,
Right.
ratchet up.
Can't lose anybody.
Exactly. But then at some point you look at your P&L and you're like, wait a minute. Not making money either, so it's a problem.
Exactly.
So then you have to go back to the drawing board
Right.
and kind of reformulate your whole plan, your staffing model, all of this stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things I've come up with lately is we need to start doing our strategic planning in pencil.
Yeah.
We're not etching anything in stone. It better be like, oh, that didn't work. Erase that. What are we plugging in?
Yeah, and it goes back to, having a pulse.
Right.
Having a pulse on your organization, having a pulse on the market, watching the trends, and pivoting quickly. Because that's the one advantage I think we as business owners have, is that ultimately we have the ability to say what does and does not happen and make those changes a lot quicker than really large organizations.
So I know from our talks that nobody saw the pandemic coming.
No.
But talk a little bit about like what that did in the mental health space.
Yeah, I mean, it went from, I think the first 6 weeks, 5 weeks, everyone's just like, oh God. Like, I mean, what are we
Right.
going to do?
Right.
Are we going to have a business
Right. Yeah.
in a couple months from now?
Right.
Because we can't, we can't basically do nothing for this long.
Right. No billings going out. No.
Yeah, no one's seeing.
When's it going to stop? Initially, it was just flatten the curve. It's all going to be okay. Just ride it out for the first month.
And it just keeps on going.
Yeah. And it's still, to this day, it's still like, okay. But then you saw, because I know you guys do mental health, but also substance,
Yeah.
and the explosion of,
Yeah, I think 8 weeks into it, all of a sudden we started getting calls at the office. And people are like, I need to be seen. Like, I'm having some serious issues. Hospitals are jam-packed, so they're not trying to take anybody.
right. So where do I go to get,
Care.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, and then we finally get guidance, from the state that, hey, as frontline workers, you take the appropriate precautions, you open back up your doors.
Right.
And I'm assuming the state also figured out, like, hospitals can't be the only avenue to treat patients.
Exactly.
That's
Hospitals, urgent cares, everybody's overrun.
yeah, that's not going to work.
Right.
And so we did. I mean, we went and sourced PPE, stocked up.
Right.
I've never spent more money on gloves and sanitizer in my life.
Well, that even became an issue, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you got to have all this stuff. Well, you just told the world that you got to have this stuff. So
Yeah.
now there's no supply. And if there is, they want
Crazy money.
crazy money.
Yeah. So you stock up on that, and then the floodgates open, right? And you got to manage two pieces. I mean, you have your providers out there
Right.
who you don't want to get burnt out,
Right.
and so you got to manage their workload.
Right.
But then you just have this overwhelming demand of people that need to be seen and are in crisis and are having all these issues.
Right.
And then you start seeing data come out that, substance abuse is spiking.
Oh, yeah.
Suicides are spiking. Traumatic events are spiking. Divorces are going up.
Divorces are going up. Abuse.
Abuse, domestic violence. And then you just start seeing this onslaught. And I think from that period to now, we still haven't recovered.
Right.
We are still just overrun with how much demand there is, because now you also see the impacts of children being isolated and their social awareness, and you're seeing so many different pieces.
Yeah, I think
come
there's been
up
an
into the
explosion of
society.
behavioral problems
Yeah.
at schools, everywhere.
Everywhere. workplace. I mean, and I don't think it's going to stop. I think everything I read, I think for the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be in the thick of it. But that pandemic era of just not knowing what you were going to see, and then all of a sudden you went from one day being not that busy to the next day it's just out of control.
Waiting lists and
and then you're just trying to manage it. You're just trying to figure out, because we all got in this to help people,
right?
And we want to help as many people as possible. It's just figuring out how.
Yeah, but that brings up a good point, like we talked about earlier. When you are locally owned, but at a scale size, you can pivot quicker.
Yes.
Right? Instead of these monolithic companies that are like, well, we're going to have a meeting.
Yeah.
To have another meeting. And in maybe 6 months or a year, we'll have a plan in place.
I remember sitting up after we started getting those calls on a Sunday night, talking to a couple of our psychiatrists, a couple of our therapists, and basically just building a protocol on how we're going to do this, building a decision tree on how, if employees test positive, what the decision, or they feel like they might be exposed, what the decision tree is, and publishing these documents out on a Monday morning, training the staff.
Yeah, immediately.
Getting back to work.
Right.
And it was just like, all right, we got the supplies, we got this stuff in place. It's all hands on deck. Let's go.
You probably already had like a triage, right?
Yeah.
Like, are they in crisis or whatever? But all of a sudden, that volume hits, and you're trying to triage exponentially more people.
Yeah.
Like, who really needs to get in? Who's in crisis? Where can we get them in?
Who needs medication refills?
Right.
Who needs,
Oh yeah, that's another one, right?
it's just basics, right? And yeah, you do. You try to triage it as much as possible. But then you have the constraint of, right, employees are contracting COVID. And so your workforce is short.
Right.
And you can't hire people at that point in time.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, well, it's hard to triage if you can't answer the phones.
Right. Yeah, I can't go hire, I got 10, 20 people out with COVID. I can't go hire 20 people because in 2 weeks, whenever they're back, now I got twice the number of people. Is the volume, that you've got that funnel, everybody talks about the sales funnel, and okay, we've got, in our world, it's referrals, right? Like, we got a bunch of referrals backing up. So how do you guys approach that for like adding staff? Like, do you look and go, hey?
So, in normal times, we have metrics that say, on average, staff can, process X amount of referrals or take X amount of phone calls.
Right.
You look at your overall volume, because we track how many phone calls come in and all of that. And then you basically build a staffing plan around that.
So that's your sales funnel, right? You put out whatever information. You look at how many calls come in, how many of those calls become patients. Yeah. And then how long are they going to be there? Which has got to be a weird thing in your world. I know in physical therapy, if I get a eval, it's an ACL, we're going to see you 20 times. If it's a back pain, we'll see you 6 times. How's that work in the mental health world?
In most times, so if they're doing strictly like outpatient, medication management, individual therapy, they're probably a patient for at least a year, a lot of times life.
Yeah, so there's no...
But you can, as a person gets stabilized, you don't need to see them as often.
Okay,
so you just spread the visits out.
Right, so you know that, and then I can bring more in.
Exactly.
Right.
On kind of our more intensive programs, they're usually there for either 3 months or 3 to 5 months. But then we step them down into kind of like the traditional outpatient care.
Right.
Again, that's, knowing the 3 to 5 months is a lot easier to kind of plan.
Right.
Versus the lifetime patient.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Because you got to figure out, all right, each person can see X amount of people, kind of given the lifetime, this is what their total panel can be, and what do you do? And figure out how many people you need to hire every
Right,
year
down.
to continue to service that.
Right. Well, I know, just having our conversation over the years, that you were the first person that I ever heard talk about ketamine infusions. Mm-hmm. I was like, what? so let's go that first, because you know where I want to go next. This is the one that I just love. But that comes from just paying attention, right, to what's happening, what's coming, what are the trends, and not just dispelling it right away,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, no, I mean, without a doubt, I think every industry, there's always whether it's new technology, new treatments,
Right.
new product, and I think
So how do you look at, because it's the same with us, right? Somebody comes up with some new gizmo machine, and some of them are dogs, and some of them are like, wait, this could be something. So how do you look at that from your seat of?
I think a lot of it is based on. I think there's kind of three things I would use, right? One, actual talking to or seeing patient results, right?
Right, yeah,
Because results
Yeah.
speak a lot,
right,
but you can't just use that solely
right.
because
Yeah, you can never remove the anecdotal piece, right?
exactly.
I mean, some percentage of everything we do is there's an anecdotal piece, there's a story,
Yeah.
but is it a true clinical change?
So I think you couple that with understanding why it works,
Right.
right?
Yeah. What's the science?
Yeah.
behind-
What's the science behind it? Why does this work?
Right.
A lot of times people can't give you the why,
Right. Or they make it up.
or they make it up, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
And
there
so
was a machine when I first graduated PT school. There was this new electrical stim machine, and at first the guy just came in and said, "Look, I don't know why it works, but it works. It helps with pain." I don't know who he talked to, but it morphed into, by the time he presented it, he's just talking to and all the therapists are just like, "Oh my God, this is just revolutionary!" Da, da, da. And I'm sitting there as a new grad, and he throws out this statement that, "Well, yeah, see what it does is it reverses the sodium potassium pump." And I was like, "Hang on, what? What did you just say?" He goes, "Yeah, it's just, we've shown." And I go, "Okay, that doesn't work from a physiological standpoint. Sodium's bigger than potassium. It only goes one way. You can't force it back through." He's just like, "Oh crap." Who's this young kid that's like, "Dude, shut up with the science stuff. I'm trying to sell."
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I don't care if you sell. Just come in and say, "I don't know how it works." Don't start making crap up.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it, right? I mean, you take the science, you take the results,
Right.
but then the last part is, what does the market say?
Right.
Because the first two things could be absolutely positive,
Right.
but if there is no market, or there is no, there's not a demand for it,
Right.
or there's not a demand that you see on the precipice,
Yeah.
it's a dog.
Yeah. That doesn't matter.
And
It could be the greatest thing ever, but nobody wants to buy it.
And that was kind of what we looked at with ketamine, right?
Okay.
I mean, it hit the science portion of it. We saw the patient results on it, and then we saw the market. We saw groups actively in Canada, in the Eastern United States. People were very big on this, and we said, okay.
And I know that, like in several things, the first initial pushback is, "Oh, that's is a tranquilizer, right?"
Yeah, anesthetic, yeah.
Yeah, okay, an anesthetic. So, but explain how does it work? So, why does it work different than just mental? Because you use it in combination, right?
So it's low dose ketamine infusion, right? So it's at a very low dose. So the goal is not to knock someone out.
Right.
But what it does essentially is the low dose ketamine, it initiates psychedelic's a bad word, but I can't really come up with another word. But it induces kind of a disassociative state
Okay.
in the individual. And, you know, what the research says is that allows the individual to have, again, better insight and better processing around some of their traumas or anxiety or depression that they're going through. You couple that with having a therapist there who can help you walk through processing certain things while you're in that state, and you see a really good outcome.
And it's not like a one size fits all thing,
No.
right? It's not for everybody. It's not like you just don't go walking in going, "Hey, I heard about the ketamine thing. I'd like, get a little."
No, I mean, you got to try the traditional therapies first.
Right. Okay.
And be evaluated to determine if you're a good candidate for this. We don't just say, hey, everybody go,
Let's go get a dose of ketamine.
get a dose of ketamine. And you have to be committed to it because it's not just one dose. I mean, it's 6 doses in the first 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And then for probably the first year, it's about a maintenance dose every month thereafter.
Oh,
So if
okay.
you're not committed to the whole program.
So it's not just a short term, like, hey,
No.
it's just for this hour of therapy.
No. I mean, this is a full program. So if you're not committed to that full program, we're not going to recommend you do it. It doesn't make sense.
And do you see, well, I answer my own question because just in my world, so it sounds like it's just a modality that helps get better outcomes, right? So at least in my world of therapy, we use electric stim, used to use ultrasound. It used to be everybody got it, even you need it or not. But there's other little techniques you use. But we'll get the occasional patient that comes in and is like, hey, I don't really want the exercise and the stretching. I just really want the stem. So do you get that? And is that a red flag for you that somebody starts going, hey, I just really need the I just need the ketamine and I'll deal with this.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely, we have to ask certain questions before and after. Right. There's certain check-ins that we have to do. You have to go and be evaluated by a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner before you can even do that. I mean, there are steps that have to happen.
Right.
If you're just coming and say, I don't want to do any of that, can you just give me ketamine?
Yeah.
We're gonna say no, we can't. It's not legal for us to do it. It's not a good practice to do it.
Kind of like my license. I kind
Yeah.
of like to keep it.
So we're not doing that. We have to have a very strict protocol on how we do it,
Right.
and we also have to give you forewarning that for the first couple of times you may not feel anything, or you may not, and it may not take.
Right.
But you have to be committed to going through the full process.
So it's not that light switch that, oh wow, all of a sudden I'm better.
No.
So
And you still got to do the other things. You still got to do therapy. You still got to do the other things to work on.
Right.
Because it's not just a silver bullet that's going to fix everything.
Yeah, it's not just a Band-Aid you put on it and wait for it to heal, right? So and now this, because you were the first one to talk about psychedelics too, like the meds, and now I see it like advertised. I was like, dude, Ganesh was talking about this a few years ago. No, and I was even like, do you think this is really going somewhere? And you were like, I think there's promise. But now to see it a couple years later being advertised, like.
Yeah. I mean, you have companies like Mind Bloom and other psychedelic companies out there.
Right.
I think there is a lot of promise. I still think, I mean, unlike ketamine, which is, legal, DEA authorized. Right. These treatments, it's more of a state-by-state exemption. And so I think the promise is limited, kind of going back to that market idea, right? Is there a market? Well, the market's limited because it's only allowed in a certain select states across the United States. Yeah. Number one. Number two, there's going to be significant pushback from Big Pharma.
Oh, yeah.
Because... if these things work better and they're cheaper,
right?
Then
but down to the science level, what is it? What is it? Where do they get the psychedelics? Like, is it It's obviously a microdose of.
Yeah, so it's a microdose of psilocybin,
Okay.
And that's probably like the one that's the most common or the most being looked at today, right? And I think, if I remember correctly,
So magic mushrooms.
yes, I think they're growing them in.
For those of you in the 80s. There were more than microdosing yourself in the 80s.
Yeah, you're probably doing a little bit more than what they're going to do. I think it's grown in Oregon, I believe, and there's probably a few other places. Right. And so, again, I mean, it's kind of similar. I mean, I think it's a similar premise to ketamine. Right. And in that, to be honest, I haven't looked too much just because there's not been. It's not. Well, I think it's slated on the ballot for California, but I don't think it has enough traction yet.
Well, I think it's anything like where we've heard the horror stories all our life. Right? It's like cannabis, right? Marijuana, like, oh, it's gonna make you do these, and it's a gateway drug. All these bad things are gonna happen. Don't do it. So the older people, that's still what's burned in our brains, right? Mm-hmm. From, oh, this is a dangerous thing, and then all of a sudden they legalize it, and then...
And I think, I can't remember if it was late 70s or early 80s, there was a lot of research done on these different psychedelics that was shut down basically by the DEA.
Oh, really? So they were looking at it early.
Yeah.
Well, but they were, like, even LSD was supposed to be like a more of a treatment than it was ever intended to be.
To be a street drug.
Yeah, it's a street drug.
Yeah, there is I can't remember. I think there's a documentary on this on Netflix about this.
Oh, about that.
About the research.
Right.
But I think they still have a long way to go with it. Right. I mean, from FDA clearance to legislation. And then you can actually figure out, is there a market for it?
Right. So that doesn't pass the third test that you were talking about earlier, right?
Not yet.
So where's the market at?
Yeah, I think the market remains to be seen. I think people will tell you, oh, there's going to be a huge market. This thing's going to blow up. Just because there's a limited amount of people that are very passionate about it and feel like this is solving the world. That's also what they said about cannabis, that the tax revenue is going to be amazing.
Right.
That the marketplace is going to be amazing. It has proven to be pretty good, but there was an article that came out last week talking about legal dispensaries. Their sales are down like 15% year over year, right? Because they're still losing out to the legal dispensary. The
illegals.
Yeah. So I'm like, so when everybody who wanted to own a dispensary now is kind of thinking, maybe that's not a good idea.
Exactly. If you can go get it somewhere else and
not pay taxes, and be cheaper. And so that's kind of that market test is, when it's all said and done, the science checks out, the patient results come in. Can you justify that there being a large enough market need to make the investment to do the business?
Well, I think part of it's like that famous line from Jurassic Park, right? Like, nature will find a way. Mm-hmm. Well, I think humans will find a way too, right?
Yeah.
It sounded like a good idea, but... And it's my take, too, on, like, this fentanyl explosion. If you look at what happened, right? We were handing out oxys and Neurotins like candy. All of a sudden, docs came down, the insurance companies came down on the doctors and said, hey, we're going to start watching you. If you give too much of this, you're going to be in trouble. You cut off supply. But you cut off a supply to people already addicted.
Yeah.
So they're going to go find what they think is oxy or Neurontin, but it's not. It's
fentanyl.
It's fentanyl.
And again, I mean, that's 100% true, right? You only fix one part of the problem.
Right.
And
thinking that humans are going to be like, oh, right, well, I guess I can't use that, and I'll go back to Tylenol or ibuprofen.
Yeah. I mean, if you only fix one part of the problem, it's only going to exacerbate the other side.
Right.
It's not going to make it better. Because, I mean, you're talking years of abuse,
Right.
and then all of a sudden, the spigot gets turned off.
Right. Yeah.
They're going to source it somewhere.
Yeah, the desire doesn't get turned
No.
off. The
cravings,
need, the
yeah.
cravings. So how much of that have you guys seen in your world? Like, well, obviously, the grief side of somebody that overdoses and the family's left with it. But has there been an uptick of
Of
people trying to get off?
Oh, yeah. I mean, mental health and substance abuse kind of have had similar trajectories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both significant increases of people seeking treatment, and you see it on both sides, right? I mean, people are actively trying to get sober, get clean. Once they do that, they reflect upon all the trauma that they've caused themselves and others, and now need to get the behavioral health side of the treatment.
Right.
And vice versa, people, who've been impacted by substance abuse are in our behavioral health programs. And granted, there's a lot of other reasons out there why people are in both,
Right.
but you do see a correlation on both sides,
Right.
pretty significantly.
Yeah, that's just because I would think the more attention like this fentanyl crisis gets, there at least that side too, right? Like, oh, wait a minute, this is no longer just something I can take an oxy, feel good for a little while.
No.
It's Russian roulette.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're playing with your life because you don't know what's in it,
Right.
and we've seen some very sad stories where young adults have overdosed, and it's been, they tried it once.
Right.
And
Yeah, you hear the horror stories of a kid goes to the party, he's a good kid, never done anything, and somebody's like, hey, here, give this a try.
yeah, some thought it was Molly or something else,
Right.
and all of a sudden they're in the ER. And so yeah, we've seen some really, we've heard some very traumatic stories, seen some very traumatic stories, and I mean it's it's sad, and it doesn't matter. It's a little bit defeating because it doesn't matter how many people you treat, you still hear the stories,
Right.
the catastrophic stories. But you can't lose perspective that you are, and we tell our providers, our staff, all of that, regardless of the catastrophic stories that you hear, every day you're helping avoid for one
Right.
of those stories happening.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have to continue to push through and continue to do what you're doing.
Yeah, it shows them the value. I think anybody that gets into any field, the medical field, after a while, you got to be careful that you don't get jaded to it, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, here's another,
get
here's
desensitized
somebody else,
real
yeah. And without that culture, right? So it sounds like that's part of your culture, is making sure that, hey, we don't want you to be overworked, but we also don't want you to become desensitized to, oh, here's the 10th person I talked to today that's, yeah, I heard the story. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, you can't lose that empathy because
Right.
the people who are in need are coming to you for that empathy. And it's not just empathy, right? It's treatment, understanding, respect, all sorts of social dynamics that they need. But empathy is a huge part. Like, you have to be willing to show that person that you care, that they are there, that they're around.
so I know one of the things in researching some stuff with the pandemic was the shutdown of support groups, and that a lot of them still haven't come back. So did that impact?
I definitely think it definitely impacted. Because I do remember that happening. I think at least in Kern County and Bakersfield, I think most of the support groups are back.
Are back up and running?
So
Okay.
I think that part has been relatively fine. But I think in other parts, and I think it's probably for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, I think
Right.
they unfortunately probably lost some of their membership.
Right.
during the pandemic.
Right.
Certain people don't feel comfortable getting back together in group settings anymore
Right.
after being isolated for so long.
Yeah.
And so, you just have all these different factors. And again, kind of goes back to that point of what the pandemic did, we're not going to see the full effects or recover from those full effects
Yeah.
for
Years.
5 to 10 years
Right.
from now. I mean, we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I think the biggest catastrophe that I saw come out of it is that loss of connection, loss of personal connection. We started Zooming everything. We started, not going places because you were afraid, right? If I go to a restaurant, I'm going to die. If I have my family over for Thanksgiving, I could kill my grandma. We heard all those stories, but I haven't. You see some people that have gotten back to it, but I don't think it's anywhere near what it used to be, like gatherings. And even though it's okay, don't worry about it now, just.
No, I definitely don't think we're 100% back. But I mean, I think we see that too, right? I mean, we see it on the social, personal side. We see it on the business side too. Like, I mean,
Right.
we still don't have what we consider normalcy from 5 years ago today.
Right.
It keeps on ping-ponging up and down.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think we're in for constant change for a while.
Change is always there, but it just seems like it was accelerated, right? Like,
It's just it's a rapid fire pace, right?
Yeah.
What we thought in January could change by June.
right. Yeah, and back to
that's-
the point of that's why. How do you strategize?
Yeah.
It's like, what's coming next? What's the next shoe to fall? And we had I think it was the economist that was talking about it, and it's like, what's the next shoe to fall? He's like, everything. Like you have no idea. It used to be fairly predictable. Like, okay, I know that in the physical therapy world, every year we hinge on Medicare releasing their reimbursement rates, right?
Yeah.
And it always, the first one comes out, it's like, oh, we're cutting it 20% or whatever. And then by the end, it either doesn't get cut or gets cut minimally. But it sends out shockwaves like, oh my God. Especially now in business where expenses are skyrocketing. And I think it's that people don't understand in business, like expenses are going up, but especially in the healthcare field, we can't just say, it's not like a burger joint where it's like, okay, I'm charging $10 for a burger.
No.
We're stuck.
We're stuck with accepting what the insurance reimburses us.
Right.
So if our costs went up 20% and they increase our rates by 3%, well, you better figure out 17% worth of savings.
Exactly. Somewhere in this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think you're accelerating technology too because of that, right? Because businesses, irregardless of where you fall in the scheme of fast food workers, minimum wages, and all this stuff, from the business standpoint, yeah, it sounds good, but you're incentivizing technology.
Yeah.
You're incentivizing ordering from your phone or an iPad, not talking to somebody or a kiosk, not talking to an actual person taking your order. You're incentivizing robotics. You're incentivizing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to become more efficient.
Right.
With costs the way they are, there's no way not to. And I mean, you look at the economic reports and all that, and every month, it's not that costs aren't going up anymore. They're still going up.
Yeah, just not as much as.
Just not as much.
Yeah, inflation's only 3%. Oh, shouldn't it go down a little bit? It's some way like.
So
that's still 3% on top of 8%, on top of 10%, on top of.
yeah. So I mean, when you look at all those factors, it's like, okay, well, I have to innovate. I have to figure out ways to be more efficient.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not going to make it. And again, the whole premise, right, is you didn't want to buy yourself a job. You wanted to build a business.
Right. Yeah, I think but that goes back to scaling too, right? And it's why when I see the mom and pop shops, it's like, man, I get it, but how are you surviving with these increased costs. At least when costs go up for us, we can spread it across
Yeah.
18
10 locations. 10 locations.
and different programs, and then being fluid enough to look at, okay, so there's always going to be the next opportunity, but we got to pay attention to what it is so that we can move into that area instead of just sitting back like we talked about, right?
Yeah. I think out of any time, now is the time where you have to be looking at under every crack to figure out, is there something I'm missing?
Right.
Is there something I need to implement? Is there something I need to do?
Right.
And
that's one of the things came up out of that one of our group meetings a month or two ago, and I think one of the key things I took away from that was challenge everything.
yeah,
Right? Like when you get your insurance renewal, because we just went through that fun annual task of, oh, hey, it's only going up 20% this year. It's like, okay, that's the 5th year in a row it's gone up 20%, so that's a 100% increase.
Yeah.
So you come in and tell me, oh, it's only 20. No, it's 20 on 20 on.
we did the same with our malpractice insurance renewal. Because they were talking about a minimum of 15% increase or 20% increase.
Right.
And we're like, well, no. Like, we got to go to the market.
You didn't think I was just going to stamp this, right? It's like,
all right. You got to go to the market. You got to see if someone else is willing to be competitive. And oddly enough, it sounds like there are carriers that are willing to be competitive. And it's like, okay, great.
yeah, we just switched our company health insurance because it was like our one we'd been with for a long time was like, oh, it's going up another 15, 20%. Like, wait a minute. Okay, then we're going to farm this out. And then another group came in and said, hey, if we do this, we can actually save you money. I was like, but then you get the call from the original person going, hey, I can't believe you left. Yeah, I can't believe you never brought this program either. Like, this works two ways, right? I think business, everybody's got to be questioning that, right? It doesn't always, it's not just status quo, move forward, slight increases.
And I think pre-pandemic, it was a lot easier to go status quo and stay consistent.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And your bottom line number is like, we're still good.
yeah, we're okay. Post-pandemic,
It's-
it's been such a whirlwind. I mean,
Right.
people have had really profitable years. People have had not profitable years. Costs are just nowhere where you ever thought they would be.
Right. Yeah,
And
you even saw that, like the supply shortage nightmare, and businesses trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean?
yeah,
Right? Well, I need the supplies, but do I really want to load up at the highest price? Do I really want to open a warehouse and so I have everything I need, but I'm buying at the highest price? Or do I try to ride this sucker out and hopefully the price goes down? Just because of basic economy, right? Like supply and demand. There was somehow through whatever means, supply got cut off. Demand was higher than ever, so prices went up. So I know that several business people are like, okay, I have to have these components. I'm just going to have to bite the bullet, which means, and I know a bunch of my friends in the construction world were like, how do we put a bid out for a job, right? Like, how do I say, hey, here's my bid, but it could be 20, 30, 50% more in a month, 2 months.
yeah, just the way supplies are.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to have to pay for this until I get the bill.
Every month was changing, right?
Yeah.
And I think we all experienced that.
Yeah.
And I think we're not experiencing the same level, but we still are having some of those experiences today.
Yeah, it seems like but I don't think it's, there's still some overlying things like hotels still freak me out because it used to be standard, right? You check in a hotel, they come clean your room every day.
Yeah, yeah.
And COVID is like, due to COVID, we're not come clean your room. If you need towels, let us know. I was just at a hotel a couple weeks ago, and they were like, we only come in like once during your stay. Like, Oh, cool. Do I get a discount off the room price?
No,
No.
definitely not.
So I think everybody figured that piece out too. Like, oh, because of the pandemic, we can get away with a little bit more, right? Like,
Oh,
people.
I mean, you definitely saw that. I mean, on some of the service industry side, and
Oh yeah.
you get the. I see a lot of these like venue fees now.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know what a venue fee is, but I mean, I get charged it all the time.
Yeah, you look at the bottom of your bill and it's
Yeah.
like, I'm paying for your health insurance, and your
Yeah.
it used to be just the amount and the tip.
Yeah. No, I enjoy it because I've started to ask like different businesses like, so what is this, sir? And like, I'm not gonna really dispute it.
Right.
I just want to know
Yeah.
like what you came up with to
Right.
justify it because I'm interested.
Yeah. Trying to figure out how to add it on to every
Yeah.
physical therapy visit. Be like, oh,
Maybe I can add it.
yeah, here's what insurance is paying us, but you owe us another 10% because
I'm like, does this work? It probably doesn't work for us, but hey, I want to know just for the sake of it.
well, I think it's like the restaurant industry too, right? I don't know how many times I've been somewhere and it's always, oh, we're sorry, we're short staffed. It's like, okay, but I'm still paying for.
Still paying for the meal.
If I wanted to cook my own food, I'd do it at home, right? If I wanted to, but why am I I get it, I understand it, and I don't know that there's still this weird like we talk about a lot in the groups. Where are the employees at? Like,
Yeah.
oh well, the government's giving free money, nobody wants to work anymore. That ended a long time ago.
Yeah, that part I don't think I've really seen a good answer on.
Right.
And because I think everyone is experiencing that where I understand the skilled labor,
Right.
there's a shortage, right?
Right.
Physical
So many
therapists,
psychologists,
psychologists,
psychiatrists.
psychiatrists, but there's always been a shortage.
Yeah.
That's probably nothing new for us.
Yeah, that's not going away.
It just exacerbated the shortage during the pandemic. But we've always been dealing with workforce shortages in that part.
Right.
But the front desk administrative kind of back office support,
Yeah, entry level people.
entry
across
level
the board.
staff. I'm like, how do we still have shortages here? Like, I don't understand how our wages have gone up significantly, which I would assume would make it more attractive, but apparently it doesn't. And I don't know.
Oh, I gotta get, this is my dog. Dog's cleaner. Hang on. Here comes the excitement.
Hey, buddy. Buddy, no. Stop. Do you want me to grab Lily too, or? Oh, she's.
How you doing, Ganesh? I ain't even say what's up. I was setting up.
No worries. How's it going?
Bro, it's funny. This is an extension of a conversation I had with you.
Oh.
You even remember?
Yeah.
I was like, yo, how do you sell a business? And you was like, literally, you went down verbatim. You dropping gems in here, bro. The 5-year plan is non-existent. What? Building a decision tree. The low-dose ketamine and what does it do? You don't buy yourself a job. You want to, people don't want to buy yourself a job. You want it about being a business.
We'll build a business.
Build a business. Okay, I'm gonna build it. Being.
Okay, well, I'm hopefully gonna have her back tonight, but if not tonight.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
You dropping gems in here, man. You're dropping gems. And also while we pause real quick. Fine. I always have everything back to back. I got like 4 cameras recorded just in case the SD card. You know me and my trauma SD cards. I'm like, man, I need it. Oh my gosh. Let me just fix this. I just ordered some more microphone weights. That's what the problem. That's why it keeps fucking.
Oh, it's all good.
Yeah, bro. I was like, what the hell's going on? I had to look it up, and I was like, oh, you got to put weights in this. Didn't know microphones needed weights.
Right, exactly.
Fancy microphones.
Yeah, man. Shure 7MB. They're the mics Michael Jackson recorded Thriller on.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And Joe Rogan uses them. If you ever see Rogan, same mic. Yeah, bro. This is all I do now is like go places and help people with their podcasts.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's all I do. Like.
Yeah, we got a full lighting setup and everything.
Yeah. I literally, because I have my studio, but I've learned that you know me, like my shit's kind of loud. So sometimes when you have people like more professional, they don't want this loud kind of studio that looks like a rap studio, you know?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, what if I just take the equipment out and then just go to them? Then create like a monthly fee.
Yeah.
This is what I do. So I literally take my whole board, both my cameras, all my lights, mics, mic stands,
And just haul it.
haul it everywhere. Haul it everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this is the whole ordeal.
Cool.
Got rid of the beast for a while.
So excited.
Well, Janice is the breeder.
Oh, okay.
So she was the breeder and had her for, I think, I got her when she was like a year old, so they'd already gotten her through the puppy stage and through the biting and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But whenever she shows up, she just
She's
spazzes out. But that's who whenever I go out of town, it's like, she's got a kennel, so she'll
Oh,
come
nice.
get them. She comes and gets them, grooms them.
Oh, that's awesome.
She was teaching at ROC for a while, like teaching dog grooming. So
Really?
she'd come get her
Oh.
as a demo dog. Because these kids are like, what the heck is that thing?
That's awesome.
All right, so where were we at? No.
You were at trying to figure out where the skilled labor is at.
Oh, yeah. Well, the workers, yeah.
Yeah, the workers.
Yeah.
After pandemic and then transitions to.
Yeah, I think. So, yeah. So, as we, I mean, it's just, we were talking about like, what happened to the workforce? And the other one I see that's a new trend, at least in my world, is how many hours people want to work a week.
Yeah.
Even our professionals.
Yeah, it seems like 40 is not optimal anymore.
Yeah, 40's gone.
It's like 30, 32.
Right. That's the new.
And then you also see a lot of people wanting like part-time work.
Right.
Young people want part-time work. And to me, that's a new phenomenon. I don't know it, but I don't understand why. But I do understand from a business side, we're gonna have to figure out how to work around it if we want enough employees
Yeah.
to actually work our business.
Because it's in our world, and I'm sure it's the same in yours, that patients come in with the expectation of seeing the same people.
Yeah.
So now if you've got a bunch of part-time people, now you got complaints from the patient. Go, well, every time I come here, I see somebody different.
Yeah, well, and it becomes a scheduling nightmare if you try to keep them with the same person.
Oh yeah, it's like
Because, just from a frequency standpoint, you can't accommodate.
right.
And so, yeah, I think it's more problematic. It's making the businesses more complicated. At the same time, we don't have much to not do it, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't have much choice not to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, we routinely tell patients like, hey, if you want to see Tim, this is when you got to come.
Yeah.
Or you can come other times and see other people. But I would think on the mental health side, especially.
That's tough because
yeah.
they establish rapport.
Right.
So we don't do that. We basically just try to fit people with schedules
Right.
as much as possible, and that's what it is. It's becoming a logistical issue.
Right. Well, because, and then on the other side of it with EMR, right, the days of the elaborate notes are gone.
Yeah,
Right.
notes. But the nice thing about it is, I will say EMRs have increased flexibility
Right.
because people are able to, do their notes at home or do their notes, wherever. And so I think that has helped flexibility. Especially in mental health, like Zoom, the ability to have remote employees. You don't have that
Yeah,
luxury.
televisits and
As much in physical therapy, but
there's several that try it. I haven't wrapped my brain around how it actually works because I have to get my hands on patients just so I
Yeah.
can feel like what's going on. But I think back to that rapport thing, no matter how good your note is, you know the patients you can push a little more.
Mm-hmm.
You know the patients that you have to kind of have kid gloves with. And that's hard to put in, like, okay, this person,
yeah,
hammer this person, if you push them too hard, they're going to be gone.
and I think it becomes it's just another facet to make business more complicated, right? And we work through these various scenarios and various pieces at the same time, still trying to maintain the culture you want, the experience you want for your employees and your patients alike, and
Yeah. How do you,
which ultimately requires more time from you, more effort from you.
well, I think you just hit on the new normal, right? The new normal for business owners is complexity. It's just getting more and more complex, harder to do. And then, like we've talked about with mom and pops, it's like without that support system, without that ability to look out and go, man, this is getting harder and harder.
Because it's not just you, right? I mean, you have a whole team behind you.
Right. Yeah. That's
And same with me. I mean, I have a whole team behind that help support the day-to-day infrastructure, the operations, ensuring things are getting done the way they need to get done. And I couldn't do it by myself.
oh no. I think back to like just the conversations like you're trying to do HR and keep up on all the new laws that come out every like even the big companies in our group are like, okay, is it California? Is it 5 full days of sick days? Is it so even the per diem people get that? Is it prorated? Is it? And there's no.
There's ambiguity.
Yeah. So yeah, there's too much ambiguity, makes it more complex. So if it was just me and one other therapist in a clinic, and I'm trying to pay attention to that, I'm trying to pay attention to reimbursement rates. What's happening? Are they going up, going down? Costs are going up.
I just get a Sprinter van, put the equipment inside,
Exactly.
drive around, and charge cash.
Exactly. And there is a resurgence of that too. And then, like, hey, just go cash based. I'm like, okay, maybe if it was just me, because I was talking to a couple people that are just starting into business. And it's like, all right, here's the initial steps. The world will change as soon as you have an employee, and then they're like kids, right? Somebody told me years ago that kids don't add up; they exponentially increase. So 1 kid's like having 1 kid, 2's like having 4, 3's like having 8, right? Because it gets so much more complex.
I mean, the scariest thing, right, is the first time you have to make payroll.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because before it was just, there's no money left. Like,
I'll figure it out.
I'll figure it out. All of a sudden, it's like, now we hit that pivot point early. I can't remember what year. It was one of the first years we were open, and we expanded, and something happened with billing, and I just remember filling up I'm just totally exhausted trying to navigate through this problem with the billing. We weren't getting revenue coming in. And I was filling up my car one day, and I never sit down when I fill up my car, right? I was just down there. I was so exhausted. I was like, I just got to sit down. Like, I just sat in my car like, what am I going to do? Like, because payroll was due the next day, and it was like $20,000.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at my bank account like, well, I guess we're done. I guess I'm gonna go home, tell the wife, hey, well, it was a good run, but we're done. And I just went into said a prayer. I was like, all right, I don't know what's gonna happen, but we'll see. And the next day, somehow, the money came in. I was like, okay, when does the deposit hit versus when are the paychecks going to go
Paychecks
out?
due, yeah.
Like, is the bank going to mess me up? And it's even those concerns.
Yeah.
Like, okay, talking to the bank. Okay, I need that deposit to go through before those checks start going out, so you're not dinging me with bounce checks. It's just, I think that's the complexity, and I think that's what I love about it. What you hit on is that is the new normal of business, and what people don't see unless you're in that seat. And I think I read a book a long time ago about head coaches and the assistant coach. Every assistant coach thinks they can do a better job than the head coach, but shifting that one chair changes everything, right? It's like, oh, I can sit back and watch this. Like, oh yeah, I could do this. until you.
Because you, and I'm sure this is the case, right? You have the luxury of not looking at everything. When you're an assistant coach or you're not the final decision maker.
Right.
You have the luxury of looking at things in your specific lens.
Right.
Your operational lens.
Yeah. This
your-
is my role.
Your focus. As the final decision maker, you don't have that opportunity.
Right.
You have to look at all the various impacts.
Yeah, and you've got all the critics and the naysayers and
Yeah.
everybody. It's just strange, like working on like anything, all the way down to the color of your uniforms, the logo. There will be tons of opinions, but to be the one that goes, all right, this is the one we're going with,
Yeah.
and then, but having the confidence in it to say, all right, we can't sit here for the next 5 years talking about whether it should be bright red or lighter red or orange, or we just, at some point you got to
You
go.
gotta make a decision.
Yeah, you got to make the decision, and that's true. That's that pressure.
It's the pressure, and it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because the success, you need to credit your whole team
Right.
because it is a team effort, and that's what creates a successful organization.
Right.
The failures you need to take by yourself
Right.
because you don't want the failures spilling down and discouraging your team.
Right.
You need to take those failures. You need to internalize what happened and figure out better ways to move forward. But you can't let that affect your team.
Right. Yeah, you have to take it, and even if it was like somebody did something that wasn't perfect, like I've always taken that role of, okay, what could I have done to better prepare them?
Yeah.
What did I miss that led them to do this? And I look at the failures
How
as
did I not prepare them appropriately?
right. So and instead of a failure, it's like, all right, this is a learning opportunity, right? Okay, I'm not sure what happened here, but somehow I didn't have you where you needed to be to make this decision. Instead of being the boss, like the good old days, right? Go in and start yelling at everybody.
Yeah.
And we thought that was
Motivating.
improving, yeah, motivation. I mean, I know you're a sports guy. I look at coaching now compared to when I was in high school, and they were still hitting you in the head with whistles and stuff, and kicking you, literally kicking your butt,
Yeah.
not like a suggestion. It was like, hey, I told you get your butt down there. You get kicked. I was like, all right, but we didn't. It was like it just was what it was. So I think Mo and I were talking about this earlier. With anytime a draft comes up, because I know you're a sports guy, more basketball though, right?
Yeah, huge basketball fan.
But every year you see it with whenever the draft's coming up or trade deadline. And the social media world now, everybody has an opinion.
Oh, of course.
Everybody knows what the GM should do. Oh, he's an idiot. If he doesn't do this, he's an idiot. If he doesn't, oh, I can't believe the coach isn't playing him more. They should be playing. Like, then is there a prize for understanding that? Are you on the payroll? Are you going to get fired because you make the wrong decision when you're telling? And I think that happens to us in business leadership, right? That's back to that ownership piece. You can hear lots of opinions, and people will tell you, "Oh, this is a huge opportunity. If you miss this, you're just an
screwed up.
idiot. Yeah, you're horrible." Yeah, but I'm the one that's got to make that call, right? And I'm the one on the hook for it, especially as the owner.
Yeah,
If I make a bad decision and we lose the business,
that's on me.
it doesn't matter how many people told me that, oh, this is a for sure thing.
Well, and especially, right, like an expansion doesn't go bad, a new service line doesn't go right. There's a failure that costs money.
Right.
Everyone in the organization knows that it costed money and it was a flop.
Right.
The one who feels it the most is the owner, but also the one who has to insulate everybody else from that
Right.
is the owner.
Right. Hey, at the end of the day, that owner of the sports franchise is rubber stamping it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not,
Yeah,
oh, the GM made the call or the coach made the call.
they're not passive.
Yeah, the owner's not sitting back going, hey, here's a couple $1 billion, see what you can do with it, and hopefully make some money.
Yeah.
They're like, no, I want to see. And we do that in our business, right? Like, well, we have stopgaps. Like, we have all of our managers, we have our regional directors, and then they report up to Ken. But at the end of the day, even Ken's an amazing CEO, still the big ticket items, he comes and goes, all right, look,
Yeah.
this is what we're thinking. And he makes his recommendations, and they're always really sound, but it still comes down to me going, okay, let's do it. Which means then I own it, to
Yeah.
your point, right?
Yeah.
I can't turn around and go, oh man, you screwed that up. I presented it to you.
You bought in.
Yeah, you bought in. It's like all the NFL draft coming up, right? All the GMs making moves and all the pundits out there. Oh, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. At the end of the day, somebody's got to make that decision.
It's like buying a car.
Right.
Once it comes off the lot, it's yours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't take it back and
You
be
can't
like,
take it back.
hey, never mind. I wanted the Mustang instead. I didn't really want.
Once you invest the money,
Yeah,
it's yours.
right.
You made the decision. You can't take it back. The only thing you can do is if it goes bad, you learn from it and you figure out how to make it up somewhere else.
Next time I go buy a car, I'm going to make sure
Yeah,
it has 4 tires,
exactly.
a functioning engine. But I think that's the business is so much more complex now, and I think that's where you need the team.
Yeah.
To your point, right? Like, having the ops guy, having the logistics person, having the HR person. Payroll is another one that you can get in trouble quick.
Oh yeah, I mean with all these PAGA lawsuits and
Oh yeah,
all of this, I mean there's so many ways you can get tripped up.
right. There's a bunch of landmines out there.
Yeah.
that You can
And-
just stumble. It doesn't matter if you see a landmine and you jump on it or you accidentally step on it. It's
It's gonna hurt.
it's gonna hurt, and hopefully it's not a real big one, right? It's
Yeah.
like, but that's kind of that life of an owner, right?
It is. It's the life of the owner. It's part of the process, and it's also why you need to listen to your team, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't know everything. You don't know everything.
Well, and that's another big. When you were talking about pulse earlier, that's one of the biggest pulse indicators is what's going on with my team. What are they seeing? What trends are they seeing? What are they hearing? And not just in the business, but outside the business.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much you read or study, you can't know everything, right?
No.
It's like, well, you got to hang out with everybody, right? So if you're janitor or custodial supervisor or whatever you want to call them, custodial engineer, they still can have valuable input, right? Like, hey, why are we buying this instead of this? Or, hey, what if we switch this schedule? It's like, oh, great. And I equate a lot of the success that Terrio Therapy's had with listening to people.
Yeah.
Like, hey, did you know that there's not pediatric therapy in Bakersfield? Never thought about it. And it goes back to what you said, like, okay, well, let me understand it a little better. And then finally, is there a market for it?
Yeah.
So is this really something we want to take money and put into? And it's like, oh, okay, there is a market, there's a need, there's, what's the cost going to be to get this sucker going? But all through the years, it's like people come like, hey, what about this? But I did get the reputation, like, be careful, like, so I was the opposite, right? Because I was the hard-charging entrepreneur. So I just outgrew every problem, right? Like, which you leave the wake behind you, right?
Yeah,
Like everybody's just like, oh my God, where the hell's he going now? And they joke about it. The most dangerous thing to hear out of my mouth was, hey, I have an idea. Or hey, I read a book. Like, oh God. Can we just let the water settle a little bit?
Well, and I mean, I think that's the other part, right, of being the entrepreneur is knowing when you guys have kind of hit a bandwidth issue,
Right.
where you've hit capacity,
Right.
where you need to stop being the entrepreneur,
Right.
and you need to start becoming the operator,
Yeah.
and
And if you
shore
can't,
everything up.
you better find the person who can, which is what I did
Yeah.
with Ken, right? I was like, I could probably do it. Doesn't interest me, so I'd rather find. So I've always been a fan of who, not necessarily how, right? Like, I know my strengths, so I think in business that's another piece is understanding what you do really well and do that.
Yeah.
Delegate what you can delegate, because at the end of the day, we can't
Do everything.
do everything. And then just keep building the team. And I always equate it to sports, right? Like, it's like any sports team. Business is like a sports team to me. What's the best team that I can put together to be successful? And it isn't all stars,
No.
right? You need the Dennis Rodmans of the world that are like, hey, I don't care if I score a point, but I'll get you 30 rebounds. Perfect.
You need people who are going to play the role,
Right.
and then you need the stars.
Right. You need a couple, and yeah, if you got mediocre people, it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
But take care of those stars, but realize that the role players are just as vital in the success.
And understand what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, so you can determine, is it time to go pull the trigger on something else, or is it time for me to let them do what they need to do?
Right.
And
Yeah, let them
catch up.
stabilize.
Yeah.
Let's stabilize, catch up, and be ready for the next opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of
and I get that a lot from my team, because I do like to push and I like to
Right.
expand. But this last year they're like, no, dude, we need time.
right.
we,
but
we need time to
That
catch
speaks
up.
to your culture too,
Yeah.
right? That they're willing to come to you and say, hey, give us some chance to breathe.
Yeah.
Let us have the CPAP for a little bit. Let me get some breath in my lungs before we go charging out again.
Because there's always an opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
You always hear about an opportunity,
Yeah.
and your first idea is, oh, we should do this.
Yeah.
And then everyone starts looking at you like, you're crazy.
No, seriously. Like, it's simple, right? That's one of my go-tos. Oh, it'll be simple. Well, and then you get the people behind you go, dude, it's not simple.
Yeah.
We got to have this many more people. Oh, come on. Well, let's just do it. And they're like, we'll find them.
It's going to cost X. Oh, we'll be fine.
Plan, yeah. Exit strategy later. Let's go. So but I think that is a cultural piece when people are comfortable coming to you. Like, even just walking into a clinic and knowing the employees, and I think that's one of the biggest litmus tests for a company's culture is when that
Oh, yeah.
owner walks in. Is it like, oh my God, hey, talk to him? Or is it, oh geez, here he comes. Like, everybody hide the paperwork. We don't,
Well, and it's showing up.
Yeah.
A lot of people will choose one office
Right.
and will never visit any other place.
Right.
I mean, half the battle's showing up.
Right.
It's showing your face,
Yeah, there's
being present.
there were several business books back in the day about walking the factory floor, right? Go out and interact with people. Or you just the person in the corner office on the top floor, and you have to ascend Mount Everest or Mount Olympus to see the
Yeah,
god.
exactly.
Or is it, no, I can approach them anywhere, even if they see you out, right? Like, I think it's that testament too, like, I know I was talking to Craig Harrison, he was talking about the vibration people give off, right? The energy. And when you see those happy people gravitate towards them.
Definitely.
You have that negative energy and people are like, oh geez, here comes Eeyore. Let me find a way out of this as fast as possible because I don't really want to have this conversation. You know.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's a lot of the reason, we visit every location at least every other month
Oh,
because we're geographically spread out, and it's just like there's not a lot we're doing there. We may spend an hour there.
Right.
It's just to keep a pulse on the environment.
Right.
People to see us talk about whatever.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be, you can talk sports or
Yeah.
whatever. It's just like just having that
Yeah.
human interaction, right? I think it's vital. So, what's the future look like? 10 years from now. No, we already said you can't do that.
Yeah.
But if you looked out and said, hey, you know what? We're riding out this storm. We can't plan out. Or do you have like a number or a size that was like, hey,
So we used to.
okay, yeah, yeah. Back when you could strategize.
Yeah, I think if you'd have asked me a few years ago, we had a number. That number's changed to we don't know. I think if you asked about the future is to continue to expand to communities, provide more services, whether it's through acquisition of mom and pop shops or, ground up. I think for 2024, the plan, we may do something towards the end of the year, but for right now, it's kind of pencils down, everyone
Solidify,
just
stabilize.
stabilize.
Okay.
And I think that's for a variety of factors. I mean, we want to see what happens with the economy, rate environment,
Right.
all of those things.
Yeah, it's weird how much even elections affect
Yeah.
stuff. Like, we don't know, like,
What
Do
funding
you-
streams are going to look
Yeah.
like. It just there's all sorts of reasons why we're like 2024. We're going to solidify. Maybe end of 24, early 25. We'll definitely start expanding again. Whether it's one or two locations, I'm not
Right.
sure. And then the goal is really over the next couple of years, just to kind of expand our presence from Central to Southern California.
we didn't even hit on Phoenix, right?
No, that is going fine. But I think for right now, we're more focused
On here,
on here just because geographically it makes more sense.
right. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate it. As I said, I think complexity is the key. But I do think the one thing that I know we've talked about multiple times is I think the only certainty other than change is consolidation.
Yeah,
Like, everything's going to get
it's the nature of where we are.
right. Yeah. And then, there might be some survivors out there, the mom and pops that make it.
I think there always will be,
Yeah.
right? They're just going to be few and far between.
Right. Well, I think it's going to eventually morph into really big or really small.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're talking about the disappearing of the middle classes. I think that's happening in business too. There's the small, hey, it's just a family-owned little thing, and we make enough money to
Support.
and we're under that threshold of chaos of having more than 50 employees, which is an arbitrary number that I've yet to figure out, like, where the hell that number came from. Like, who the hell decided it was 50?
Yeah.
And then you see all these businesses that are floating, like, right under it. Like, I don't want to get to 50 because that means I got to do all these new things. And my mind was like, look, if we're going to, we need to blow past it.
Yeah.
You don't want to be hovering at 51, 55 employees because you got all the headaches without the size.
And I think that's what, we already started on this path of growth. It's too late to turn back.
Yeah,
So you got to keep on going.
right.
And that's just what I think that's kind of what it is. You're already there.
Yeah.
So you have to get bigger.
Right, yeah. Yeah, once you're past a certain threshold,
Yeah.
you can't be like, all right, hey, let's close everything down. Let's go back to one-person shop. Plus, I would never want to anyhow because,
You lose your support.
yeah, well, and I think our goals change, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you'd asked me 25 years ago, like, what's your goal? Like, hey, I just want one thriving clinic. But then, once you get 5, it's like, oh, we can do 5, we can do 10.
Yeah, exactly.
If we can do 10, we could do
20.
20. We do 20, we do 50. But that is, as long as you're looking at it from that growth standpoint, that's the plan. Because then everybody else needs to know, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you went through this, but I remember when I was the only employee at Terrio Therapy when we started. But I got that first little group, my first 6 or 8 employees. I think our first Christmas party was like 10 people, and that included spouses. So that was the core group that got it going. Some of them hung in there, but there was a couple of them that, as it started to grow, were like, "Hey, I don't like this anymore. You're acting different. You're gone, or you're doing stuff all the time. We don't get to hang out." I was like, "Okay, but I can't grow and stay like that either.
Yeah.
So I'm not going anywhere. So if you don't like it, sometimes you got to let people go that don't want that next step, right?
Yeah, I think the people that are in it from the beginning, as the organization morphs, it becomes more structured.
Right. Yeah,
It-
it becomes corporate. It's
It,
like,
it,
well,
it loses some aspect of that homegrown feel.
right.
But I don't think there's any way to not do it.
No,
Right.
you're forced to do it.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I tell people with employee handbook is like, the reason this handbook is so big is because somebody did all the stupid crap in here, right?
Yeah.
We have to have all these rules because it wasn't in there before. Somebody did it and it had to be added. Now the employee handbook's like,
I mean, why I'm required to track time cards.
right, yeah.
Employee.
What do you mean I have to
handbooks.
take my lunch at the 5th hour? It's like, I didn't make the rule. I just know that if I don't enforce that,
I'm in trouble.
I'm getting hammered.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get hammered with it, but I could get into a lot of trouble.
No one likes all this paperwork,
I don't know.
but we have no choice.
Right? Oh, yeah. That's that threshold. When you get over 50 employees, all of
Yeah.
a sudden reporting's different. You have to offer
Benefits.
Benefits,
You
yeah.
do all this.
paid time. All of a sudden, time off matters, tracking it all, tracking sick days, tracking, in the good old days, it was like, hey, I don't feel well. All right, don't worry about it. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, do all the benefits accrual. Yeah, it just, I mean, it's the nature of the beast.
Right. But the complexity, I think that's my big takeaway is that complexity piece, right? Like, that's the new normal is just increased complexity. And wherever that shakes out to be technology wise,
And you just got to be willing to navigate it.
right.
If you're not,
Right.
don't get into business.
Exactly.
I mean, get a job.
Right. Exactly. If you don't want to, it's like sailing a ship across the ocean, right? You've got to have a whole crew. You got to have a team. Oh, and by the way, there's going to be storms. Nobody's ever made it across the ocean without hitting a storm. So I think that's the weird part of, we try to forecast. We try to look out at the horizon and look for the storm clouds. But sometimes,
It hits
like
you.
the pandemic, it's a hurricane that came out of nowhere and leaves you scrambling. But my big thing over the years has always been, when that happens, take a minute, assess the damage, and then reorient. Like, did we get blown off course? Or is there a new course setting we need to hit? And then once you do that, you evaluate the plan, and it's like, all right, let's take that next step. But we don't know for sure that there's not going to be another
Yeah.
storm.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is just kind of remember your core.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's what I
Always remember your core, and don't be afraid to fail.
Well said, my man. Well said.
All right, I appreciate it, Tim. It was fun.
All right.
We'll put some clips together too.
Let's go.
Where's
Get
our
that.
phone?
Get that.
We'll get Mo, doing his paper, his crunching and all.